Please welcome to the stage our panel for prioritizing IRF commitment of global democracies. Moderator, former U.S. Special Advisor for Religious Minorities, U.S. Department of State, Knox Thames. Distinguished scholar, Wake Forest University School of Divinity and former director of the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, Melissa Rogers. Executive Director, American Center for Law and Justice, Jordan Sekulow. And former United Nations Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, Ahmed Shaheed.
Good morning, friends. What a remarkable room we're in together today. When I came into this work 25 years ago, multi-faith spaces like this had never happened. And while we all come from different theological, philosophical, and political backgrounds, we stand united in believing that everyone has the freedom of religion or belief. Also remarkable is the creation over the past 10 or 15 years of different advocacy networks to advocate for anyone facing persecution. They're buttressed by an interlocking network of international standards with Article 18 from the UDHR as a center point, the right to have freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief, which really comprises the soul of the human rights system. So in my personal opinion, talk of the demise of the international rules system is premature. Why? Because of this room. Because we value these standards. We use these standards and we apply these standards. At the same time, we have to remember that this movement is outside of the historical norm, and now our movement faces extraordinary challenges. Global instability is increasing. Governmental support politically and financially is declining, all while persecution continues to victimize people of every faith community somewhere. In addition, we're seeing a shift back to hard political priorities, hard interests in Europe and the United States, reverting back to the historical norm. So we're really at an inflection point, and we need to consider this moment. And that's why I'm so happy to be a part of this panel that's going to talk about what we can do together practically to ensure that freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief is a priority and doesn't become a historical anomaly. Now, we all know the world is a lot different than it was in 1998 when the International Religious Freedom Act was passed. It's a lot different from 2020 before COVID. We can't ignore the challenges outside these walls, and we can't ignore the division in our own country. Now, how and why we got there isn't the point of this panel or this conference, but my hope and prayer for our community is that we can stay united in keeping international religious freedom a nonpartisan priority. And by nonpartisan, I don't mean naive. We can be savvy in how we think about accessing the levers of power in Washington around the world, knowing how Washington works. But we'll be most effective if we're principled in our approach, urging every administration, this one and those in the future, to make religious freedom a foreign policy priority. Now, having worked in administrations of both parties, I experienced, and I'm sure you remember, times where words and deeds didn't match up. There was a gap. Even if you favored one party over another, whatever your team's color, no one is ever 100% on point. Now, the world expects us to celebrate our side and castigate the other, but the principled approach means we also celebrate when the other side gets it right, and we prod our own side to do better when they fall short. Now, this is hard. It takes intentionality, but practically we can't sit in silence because there is a pandemic of persecution impacting millions around the world. We can't let up. But at the same time, we've got to innovate. Those against religious freedom are constantly finding new ways to repress. Today is Groundhog Day. We can't be doing the same thing over and over. It doesn't take Puxatawny Phil to tell us that if we do the same thing over and over and get diminished results, we're not going to move the ball forward. Shout out to Puxatawny Phil. But in this post-pandemic world, we've entered this new moment where political and financial support is declining. And as I've been preparing for this panel, I was reflecting on a favorite quote of mine by the late British chemist Ernest Rutherford. He won the Nobel Prize in 1908 for splitting the atom. And as he was trying to gather resources for his research, he told his team, "We haven't got the money, so we have to think." And I think that's very applicable for us. we've got to start thinking. We've got to be creative. We've got to work collectively and practically to find new ways to encourage, pressure, cajole our leaders in other countries to do better. And in a democracy, if you're blessed to live in one, our voices truly matter. So we need to respond with purpose and vigor. We need to get wisdom. We need to get understanding. We need to discern the moment. And so to help us think through this challenge, we have a fabulous panel. I'm not going to formally introduce them. Their bios, which are lengthy and distinguished, are in your materials. But we're going to be exploring the practical ways that we can move democracies, both here and other like-minded countries, to make a concrete commitment to promoting religious freedom, to recommit to doing everything possible to advance this right around the world in concrete ways so that those people suffering can see a tangible benefit from our efforts and our engagement. So first, I want to turn to my friend, Melissa Rogers. Melissa, you've served in 2 different White Houses, leading faith engagement. You work directly with religious communities. What are some examples you could share with us about best practices when religious communities came to you with a problem and how they were able to partner with you, partner with the White House to see progress made?
Thank you. And thank you so much. It's been great to work with Knox and all the distinguished panelists here and all of you. And I just want to say a special word of thanks to our co-chairs, Sam Brownback and Katrina Lantos-Switt. I've been at these gatherings since they began, and it's just been wonderful to see it continue to come together annually. I know it's a lot of work, and we're really grateful for your leadership. So to your question, Knox, when we were in government, one of the things several of the things that I really appreciated that groups did was, first and foremost, to work across faiths and beliefs as widely as possible. You know, the best coalitions are the broadest and the loudest. And so we often saw people that were working, with maybe smaller coalitions, more narrow coalitions sometimes, and that's completely appropriate, but always looking to work to form the broadest coalitions that they could, even if it meant breaking off certain issues and forming single issue coalitions in addition to multi-issue coalitions. So that's one thing. Another thing is being really persistent. Pleasantly persistent, but persistent. One meeting is never going to cut it. You got to have a lot of meetings and stay after it, while understanding schedules in people's offices and in the White House and otherwise can be tricky. So staying after it, staying in communication, that's a big deal. Also, and this links back to the first suggestion that I made, being able to express that big goal, the big principles we're fighting for, and the big achievements that we want to make. At the same time, being able to break those down into steps so that we can chart our progress and to appreciate that progress is a good thing. Achieving the silver bullet is, of course, a remarkable thing, but as we work toward that silver bullet, we can also take concrete steps that we celebrate and that we work really hard to achieve. So I would say those are a few of the things that are really helped us to work better with NGOs.
That's great. Next, I want to turn to Ahmed. We talked about multi-faith engagement, persistence. You have such unique experience, serving in not one, but 2 different UN Special Rapporteur positions, first on Iran and then on freedom of religion or belief. You've engaged with governments, good and bad, on these issues. What are the concrete tools that you've noticed that democratic governments have that they've successfully used to change behavior when they've partnered with you? And what are the tools at the UN as well?
Well, I think the most important thing is to be able to reach out to different levels, multi-levels of activity. So you have the government, you have the municipal actors, you also have the parliamentarians, the grassroots as well. So the ability to reach out to these different levels is what democracies actually possess, and that is a very, very important tool. In terms of UN's engagement, what can happen is when these actors work with the UN mandates, they reinforce each other and can have a real impact. In all my years of working for the UN, I raised hundreds of petitions on people's behalf. Many remain in prison, some were released. But when I met those who were released and meet those or family members of those in detention, they tell me without exception that every time somebody speaks out on their behalf, UN or members of the UN or society actor, when they are spoken about, when they are legitimate, as it were, they feel subjectively better and safer in their own prisons, dark cells, and also objectively better, though, because the government treats them better. So the idea is that you use these various approaches, multi-level, multi-stakeholder approaches you have, for the purpose of highlighting a case, and that works. We may not get the result we want overnight, but we keep pushing, it matters. And so the lesson I take from the UN is that we keep doing this, things do change. It may be incremental, but without that intervention, it will only get worse.
So persistence, again, another theme, and raising concerns. Jordan, democracies are powered by voters. You've worked on campaigns. You lead a major NGO. When we're trying to make the case outside of the Beltway to the public at large, what are the arguments that you use for why religious freedom for all matters?
I think that if you're the United States or in a country similar that respects religious liberty to the point where you can choose your own faith, leave your faith, start a faith, be an atheist, be agnostic, talk about it, and you know that if any threat came your way, the government would actually protect you for that belief or for your new faith. And then we see that all the time when we drive by places of worship. At different time periods, we've seen increases of violence at places of worship here in the United States, and our police go to those places, and they're outside, whether it's the synagogues now, whether it was mosque following 9/11, you see all of that. For us, what we have seen is that countries that respect religious liberty are likely going to be countries that are allies of the United States, good allies of the United States, which means allies on the same human rights values at the United Nations, someone that we can work with in a national security way, but also domestically. I think the concern right now we see in our country is that there's so many countries that don't have religious liberty at all, and everything is underground. I mean, just to give you an example, we worked with Ahmed twice. He helped us save 2 different Christian pastors, and so did Melissa's office, from death row. They were going to be hung in Iran. So they were underground church. So obviously, if you saw an Iran that respected religious liberty 20 years from now, that's a very different Iran than the United States is dealing with. And I don't want to just pick on that part of the world. Obviously, China, these countries. What we have seen for our domestic audience is you've got to be able to, they want to see the story. Now, sometimes, I think, unfortunately, with social media, it almost got overwhelming. The ISIS videos, when people saw that, whether it was the Coptic Christians on the beach being slaughtered, people being burned alive, drowned, the women being sold, it definitely woke up the church to, well, we might have faced a little discrimination here by confused government bodies at the state and local level. We handle that at the ACLJ. But there's real kind of biblical level persecution happening around the world. And so when you can pinpoint the story, when you can bring the wife or the husband in, suddenly that then they get involved in more they get more educated. So a country they might not have thought about much as more than just being an enemy of the United States, they suddenly start paying attention to what's happening in Iran. Yeah. They suddenly participate. What is happening in Saudi Arabia? Is there really change going on there? What kind of change does that mean? You can't say that every country that doesn't have religious liberty is obviously an enemy of the United States. That's not true either. But if you truly want this for the people, or your faith group, or just fellow citizens, I think that we have to put almost our individual faiths aside. And we always say this to ACLJ, while we represent a lot of times Christians and Jewish groups, when we win, we don't win for Christians only. We win for everyone. And so that was kind of how we started explaining it here. But telling the personal stories has helped in Nigeria, and with getting the president's attention on that, which was kind of bucking some State Department and national security offices who did not want to take that kind of strong move. He did. Congo, another place, obviously DRC, which is, you go to the UN and you'll hear 3 different reasons why these people are being attacks on churches. Some will say it's rebel groups, others will say it's Islamist rebel groups, and there's not clarity there. There needs to be clarity. Is it religion-backed violence, or is it mineral rights-backed violence in the name of religion? But to us, it's the stories. Yeah. If you just talk about it generally, it doesn't work for people, right? There's so much going on in their daily life. But for Americans, I think we can honestly understand that if your country adopts robust religious liberty, it means you have robust free speech rights, which means your people can protest. It means you can say things that may sometimes be awful to other people, but are going to be legal and lawful. Because a lot of our faiths contradict, ultimately. And they have very different, end times kind of focuses, or what happens if you don't believe in this faith or that faith. So you have to respect it to that point where you're going to hear things that you strongly disagree with, but at the same time, you kind of celebrate that. So that, because you can say that too. So while you may be interpreting, one sermon as awful, someone else is interpreting it as this is wonderful, and that's exactly what we're looking for. Really, it comes down to why is religious speech treated so much different from other speech? And it's because the power of it, right? It's the power. It doesn't, whatever faith group it unites people, they come together, and we've seen that politically happen all over the world. So you want to put down those kind of movements that are underground. But I do believe that if we, and I think it's why it's important, like we're here, because we can meet so many of the people with the stories, and then tell those stories through our media departments, take it to the UN, so that the wife, the husband, the family has to be seen in the room by the country that is persecuting the father, that is imprisoning the father. And it's embarrassing to them.
Yeah.
China doesn't like when you do that. Iran does not like when you do that. Russia, I mean, we had an officer in Russia until the war, and we beat them once at the the European Court of Human Rights, and literally got a phone call from the Federation to our office in Moscow that said, listen, when you have some regional government out of control, just tell us.
Yeah.
We'll stop it. Don't do that to us anymore. That's not us. Now, what did we see come out of that? We saw there was a birth of religious liberty for a period of time, even under Putin, an embrace of the Orthodox Christianity, but also other faiths. Other pastors weren't having issues. And then suddenly, when those pastors started being associated with the West and things got difficult again, the religious liberty falls back.
Yeah. I think the power of stories is absolutely right.
Yeah.
And in the time we have remaining, Melissa, I'm interested to hear how you made the case for why high-level policymakers should be engaging with religious actors. Like what's the argument that you made inside the White House for taking the time to hear their concerns on domestic issues, on international issues? What was the winning argument for you?
Yeah. Well, we certainly can't understand our nation or our world without understanding religion. Religion is so important to so many people, and religion groups and other groups of conscience do so much work in the humanitarian space that's so important. That plus the critical fundamental human right of religious liberty, as well as other rights that are defended by groups of faith and conscience, and it's important to our Constitution and our international law. It just makes all the sense in the world to have our government officials hearing from religious groups, and also having people who understand faith and who understand religious freedom in senior positions, both in domestic and foreign policy positions within government, with wide visibility across policy processes and authority to dig in wherever necessary, because religion can be a part of every human endeavor. So you need that kind of ambit to address the issues. Another thing I want to say, because of the title of this segment, that we're working on global democracies and how they can prioritize religious liberty, is how important it is for global democracies to lead by example.
Yes.
To recognize religious freedom for everyone, everywhere in equal measure, to strengthen and preserve our democratic systems and the rule of law, to make sure that we are supporting robust programs like refugee resettlement and their integrity. These are all things that are crucial to the sustenance of religious liberty in our own country and around the world.
Yeah. Ahmed, same question for you, but in the UN context. When you would be presenting a report to the Human Rights Council or the General Assembly, what were the themes that you would highlight to make the case for why those governments needed to care more about religious freedom?
I think the most compelling case to be made, and I try to make, is that in everybody's interest to address this issue, because religious repression doesn't stay in one space. It's not sporadic, it's often systemic and spreads. and then everybody is involved in that. That's one. Also, look at the major global issues like refugee crisis at the moment. One of the biggest reasons why we can't even begin to make a dent in the repatriation, for example, is because today conflicts are more protracted, and as a result, you don't get to resettle them, so repatriate them. And one reason is, of course, religion gets implicated in these conflicts. So religious repression tends to prolong conflicts as well. So the idea is that to understand that it's in everybody's interest to work to address the issue here. It's not about one group or the other, it's about everybody's equal rights. And once we make that argument that everybody has a stake in doing it right, then I think the needle moves faster. There are many examples of this. For example, take the US here. US leadership some years ago on defamation of religions, blasphemy laws. It's a classic case. I think it has been described as the best thing done by the Human Rights Council because it resolved this issue and showed everybody a common way to address incitement to violence and incitement to discrimination. So pointing from polarized positions to a common shared goal, that's the best way to go forward. Of course, we can use other avenues, but the most productive, most long-lasting effects come from that kind of finding the common ground on which everybody can move together.
And last question, Jordan, in our time we have remaining. ACLJ is a nationwide organization, grassroots. You hear from the grassroots every day. Give us some advice on how you translated that energy outside the Beltway to move the needle here in Washington.
So I think what's important is, I think through our entire time at the ACLJ, and we started domestically and then we grew internationally pretty quickly in very diverse kind of places, whether it's Strasbourg, which is our European headquarters, but we're in India, Pakistan, we were in Russia, and we might be again, if the sanctions are lifted and they were able to survive through their legal process there. But we're also in Israel, but our first client after we opened our Israeli office was a Palestinian Christian family whose husband was killed by Hamas. He was the head of the Bible Society in Gaza, and she just needed to get to the West Bank to be reunited with her family. And this was a day before Operation Cast Lead began. We didn't know that at the time. We got the call, though, because Israel knew she was our client. And we had worked at the UN, we had worked to kind of expose, to the point where Hamas, they went to the gate and they took her there and they said, no one's opening this gate today. And Israel, I was like talking to them on the phone, they said, these are the stories that work because it brings people in. So the one fan, I'm talking to the Israelis, I've got her, and then she hands the phone to the Hamas guy. I'm like, listen, you can't follow her. When she gets to the halfway point, the gate will open. And you need to close your gate immediately. And so I kind of confirmed that with Israel, and it happened. And so you can do that a day before a country goes to war if you push hard enough. That kind of story for years drove supporters of the ACLJ because they realized, wow, this is not just about an issue that you can resolve in the U.S. civilly, or even at the U.S. Supreme Court. This is about saving people's lives. So and most of our faiths call us to do that if we can, to save the innocent. Almost every faith calls for that. So if we're truly practicing our own faith, that's how we talk to our people. If you're truly practicing your own faith, you can't ignore the issues in your own country. You want to handle those first. Like Melissa said, we have to, if you're going to come doing this from the United States, the U.S. has to be protecting religious liberty here at a very robust level too. And while I think we are the greatest country in the world when it comes to doing that, we see how quickly things start slipping with our Western allies when the religious speech also kind of intertwines with political. Like I got back to initially, is that we do understand that robust religious liberty can change a country. And it can, not just its people, but its entire way it's perceived around the world. And so, again, those stories, people understanding how it can make them safer, but also the dictate of their faith. Calls them to do something.
Yeah. And along with that, I would say defending religious liberty as part of the promotion of a broader human rights agenda, because that gives a lot of power. And sometimes there'll be tensions among different rights and liberties, but when we're working together, we can find where we agree and work and be shoulder to shoulder on that. And where there are differences, we can have dialogue, respectful dialogue about those conflicts, and make sure that we're working to increase understanding and trust. At a time of deep polarization in our own country and around the world, this is just essential to the cause of religious liberty and for the benefit of human dignity and all the rights that are necessary to realize that dignity on behalf of everyone, everywhere.
Amen. Well, let's thank our panel and also thank the IRF Summit for providing this venue to talk today.
Thank you.